Hello and welcome to this week at the movies. I'm Matt,
Dun 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 dun. No, okay, I'm Eric.
and today we're going to dial up some Destiny as we look at the most recent Indiana Jones film. Eric was just like Phoebe Waller-Bridge in that picture. He could not believe what he was seeing. Just kidding. We'll find out. So this week's big release is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which is the fifth Indiana Jones film, the first one since 2008. But really, I like to think of it as the first one since 1989. Uh, this is also the first one that wasn't directed by Steven Spielberg. James Mangold taking over the directorial duties here. We saw a couple of familiar faces return. Karen Allen makes an appearance. John Rhys Davies makes an appearance. We saw some new people. Antonio Banderas. We got a villain played by Mads Mikkelsen. We got a two-dimensional stick figure played by Boyd Holbrook. And we got Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Indiana Jones' goddaughter and kind of a partner in crime in this one. Eric, what did you think of the Dial of Destiny?
Let me start traditional. Um, I thought all of the actors in this, their performances were fantastic, including the two-dimensional stick figure Boyd
I'm not
Holbrook.
giving you Boyd Holbrook. I find that personally offensive.
I think I'm actually gonna go ahead and tell you, like, his character is the reason why I felt like death had any weight. So I felt like without him, there were no stakes to the movie. And I have to get deeper into that later. But he was just like readily despicable, and he stands among this core of two or three villains, not an army of villains, two or three that think they are holding an army on their shoulders. And I like Shawnette Renee Wilson, I thought was fantastic. I've heard arguments that you could have blurred the characters and let her take over Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, where you just have the reason she's into Indiana Jones is that maybe she was assigned to his case because her father knew him. And then you just kind of like mesh those and whatnot. So I went ahead and looked up some information and whatnot. So here's what it is. It's an adventure. Indiana Jones, not counting anything that's a flashback, is retiring. He's done. And yet his life is sort of falling apart, the life that he'd hope he'd have. And this person shoves their way into his life for their own personal, like almost sinister, like personal intent, and gets him involved in one last adventure revolving around a dial of Archimedes. And it's weird because I see a lot of people point this out as being just like a fetch quest and all of this kind of stuff, but the motivations are so weird and messy, and it is so unconventional as to why the lead characters are doing what they're doing at any given point in the movie, that I can't chalk up the plot motivation to fetch questing. Maybe for when they're going under the water, but I don't know. I think I'm speaking a lot in riddles. Thomas Kretschmann, that's the guy from Wanted and several other movies, who played a Nazi in here, and I think kind of got like a little overlooked, because I feel like with Indiana Jones, historically, you have the Nazi villain and you have the archaeologist villain that works with the Nazis, and I think that was Mads Mikkelsen. But people are kind of like,
Well, he was also, I mean, let's be honest, a full-blown Nazi.
he was absolutely, yeah. But so the editing in this movie is confusing. Okay, there's like just one key example. After the incident where Indiana Jones and team goes underwater, they come out. Mads Mikkelsen starts looking through binoculars at the boat that they're following, and they think they've pulled off this trick. And there's a shot of him looking through the binoculars at them leaving. Then you cut away to a scene where they discuss where they're going for like 3 minutes of screen time. And then real quick cut back to the binoculars, and he goes, they're heading east, not west, and he fades away. And it's like, were you staring at them for a full 3 minutes till you realize what direction they were going? Like, what is this?
I mean,
And
he was creepy, so.
yeah, I've seen people point out things like there's a weird sort of jump in the betting scene where Indy like cracks his whip a bunch and they all pull guns on him, then he ducks on the ground and suddenly no one is pointing their guns and everyone's scattered and in different locations. And it's I don't think it would stand out as much if this franchise didn't have such a history of meticulously and masterfully storyboarded action event set pieces. And that's the thing. This was clearly made with the technology that you have coming out of the Mandalorian and all that Disney's been using. This was clearly, unfortunately, looks fake for a lot of the movie. The stuff that does not feel fake to me works really, really well. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy Harrison Ford, as this character. My huge conceit, and I'm giving this movie 1 thumb up, is that I think this is a standalone epilogue. I don't feel like this even fits in the chain of adventure, adventure, adventure. For all of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull's faults and its fakeness and its weird CGI blobs and the vine swinging and all of these little moments that pick it out, at its core, it feels like Indiana Jones on an Indiana Jones adventure in an installment. I still think you can make the argument that it's a trilogy with this new epilogue, but I'm going to stop there for now. And I'm just going to say, I think James Mangold and VFX don't mix. Like historically, the Wolverine's ending is notoriously panned for that silver samurai, like weird sucking thing. I didn't really buy. I love Logan, but young Hugh Jackman fighting old Hugh Jackman, as long as his face is not on screen, it worked. I don't know what it is about James Mangold's movies, but it's like he knows so well how to stage and direct live actors and pull like gritty, like tangible worlds and sequences and put them together. But if he has to do it in post-production, there's some glitch, there's some allergy or something. I don't know what it is. Anyways, in total, this is an Indiana Jones adventure that makes a statement about Indiana Jones, and I give it 1 thumb up.
I think the Wolverine is terrible in general. I mean, he doesn't even take getting to the ending. That actually might. I get them confused. I think that one and X-Men Origins Wolverine are horrendous. I can't remember which one I hated more.
Oh, but at least for completely different reasons. You got to give it that. Like, they're not the same animal.
I am also giving Dial of Destiny 1 thumb up. I enjoyed it more than I thought. I was both excited to see it and incredibly nervous. I do think you miss Steven Spielberg in here. You notice that it's not him, just in some of the way that it's constructed. I did like the nostalgia things, he's fighting Nazis again, the way little things like where they cut away to the map to track progress, little musical beats, things that feel like Indiana Jones. I did enjoy the quest for the most part, and when they get into the quest, and it was kind of fun, they found their own way to have him and a female protagonist and a little junior protagonist. That all felt very familiar, kind of putting it together. Of course, don't worry about romance at all here, because Harrison Ford's like 80 years old in real life. No, I'm not throwing Indy under the bus, but I mean, it's just a different phase of the character. I think it's too long. It suffers a little bit for me there, especially the first like half. I thought was pretty dry, and I was real nervous. Then that I almost don't know if we needed that 20-minute opening sequence where they de-aged him. I've been thinking about it for a while. There are some, I guess, fun things in there, but I don't think it furthered the story. I think you could have gotten everything you needed with a couple of flashbacks to Toby Jones, one of which they already have in there, that he was obsessed with this. I don't know that it did enough to establish a background for Mads Mikkelsen's character that you needed. And there were parts of that were weird. So you could have taken, 20 minutes off, and then you're right in line. The Indiana Jones movies were always around 2 hours, 2 hours and 10 minutes. This one's 2 hours and 34 minutes. You could have sucked that 21 minutes out, and you might have had a better, tighter movie. I know it is typical in an Indiana Jones movie that you have some kind of non sequitur opening action sequence. I mean, we get it in Raiders with the rolling ball. It doesn't really impact things, so I'm sure they were trying to have that kind of big Saturday morning serial opening, which is, the original origins for this. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg wanted that, Saturday matinee serial action feel. There are moments that work really well. For me, it's when Harrison Ford kind of is allowed to be. There's a moment between him and Phoebe Waller-Bridge on the boat when they're talking about, would you go back? And he's talking about what happened to his son, what happened to his marriage, what happened to his life. That was incredibly poignant. I didn't know I needed the tag at the end of the movie, but that part ends up being, really resonant too. It's a weird plot device, but somehow it worked. I did think, and I'm just going to say, we've talked about Harrison Ford has been in the last probably decade on a reunion tour of all of his famous characters, and there's been one thing that seems to unite that. He's like, sure, I'll be Rick Deckard again. Dies. Oh, I'd love to be Han Solo again. Dies. Oh yeah, I'll do Indiana Jones again. And when from a minute there, I thought they were going to leave him, and I'm like, you, Jack, I cannot believe you're doing this to another one of your characters. So I was actually mildly surprised that wasn't how it ended. I know people have talked about, it seems like Disney's trying to set up some IP with maybe having Phoebe Waller-Bridge continue as her character in this franchise series. I don't know how I'd feel about that. I don't know if that works. I honestly don't think we need more Indiana Jones. I don't know if I needed this one, although for me, it was a great improvement over the last one. As much as I love Steven Spielberg, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull did not work for me, which we'll probably get to with our when we talk about our franchise ranking. So I really liked Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I tend to love her style and comedy. If you've seen Fleabag on Prime Video, I just, she had some hilarious lines and just some deliveries and stuff, like when they're getting ready to dive on the boat and she said something like Officer Brandy reporting for duty and gives him a flask. Just things like that works for me. I liked it more than I expected, which is why I gave it a thumbs up. I thought it was better. It wasn't as good as it could have been, and it wasn't as bad as I feared it would be.
There is a condition in which I would give this movie 2 thumbs up and parade this movie as genius. And that is if half of what feels like mistakes in this movie were intentional. What this movie accidentally continues a trend that's been floating through, I believe, The Matrix Revolutions. There's weird winks at Iron Man 3. And there's something that I talked with Curtis from the other podcast that we do, This Film Not Rated, about Across the Spider-Verse that just came out. Across the Spider-Verse is something that comes out as feeling fresh and new, that's built on a monument of what's already been done. And I made a comment in our episode on that in that way, it sort of feels like the finale of a fireworks display starting to go off. And I couldn't shake that feeling. And it's interesting because what got me started thinking about this was thinking, we don't need this opening sequence in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And so I started thinking, like, why is this here? And I started thinking, you know what? If it wasn't there, this would never have felt like an Indiana Jones movie. I don't think. He would have gotten on a horse, but he would have been chased in a subway. It would have felt weirdly modern. And then when we do get into the tomb and temple and all this, we go back particularly to a sword and sandal, like old style blockbuster, pre-blockbuster blockbuster. And I started to put these things together and kind of thought like what this movie sort of accidentally is spending the first 25 minutes proving we could make Indiana Jones as Indiana Jones once was. Okay? And then they did something that kind of reinforced that I thought maybe this was intentional. Anthony Ingruber, the character that plays young Harrison Ford in Age of Adeline, who got famous on the internet for his impression of Harrison Ford, is sitting at the betting table for the dial. He's in the movie. And I was like, so they paid Anthony Ingruber to be here and not be young Indiana Jones when they could have, while they're showing off an old Indiana Jones adventure that almost deliberately looks fake. And then every time they're in reality, it doesn't feel like Indiana Jones. And every time they're pushing the flavor of Indiana Jones, it's set in hard green screen and looks fake. And it starts to create this back and forth where when Sala yells, "Give him hell, Indiana Jones," he is interrupted by a car honking him. And when Harrison Ford begins to romanticize his life and talk about how he's losing everything, he's cut off and pushed the other direction by saying, "You've still got a ring on your finger." And there's this relationship between Indiana Jones and his wanting to go back to the way things were, wanting to go back to those adventures, and him reminiscing at his time with Toby Jones, and him wanting to recapture parenthood with Phoebe Waller-Bridge because of Lost Mutt, and the fact that they've deliberately taken away the life he once lived, that sort of starts to turn every single scene into, in my opinion, an almost accidental genius commentary on, we're done. We've had these stories. What do you want? A fifth one that feels just like the other ones to cycle around on a just going through the same flavor for more hours? And it started to get me thinking about characters like Teddy, the kid, who is, in Indiana Jones' eyes and probably the audience's eyes, short round. Just enough to be short round, but never in reality is just looking out for his own skin. He's not short round. He doesn't have any allegiance to Indiana Jones. He has an allegiance to Phoebe Waller-Bridge, but it's mostly for his survival. There's a reality underpinning things that the romantic view of it doesn't work. And it's the same thing with Phoebe Waller-Bridge. She comes in as this idealistic student who's like, "You knew my father and you were my godfather," but you sort of learn underneath of that, she's like, "You were never really a godfather to me. You were a means to an end, and now I'm trying to sort of get away from you." And their relationship grows in this different sort of way, where she's trying to tether him to reality while he's slipping towards his idea of romance for history and excitement for the dial. And it's sort of like the dial is this ticking time bomb of being thrust into an opportunity to go backwards. And the movie then gives you deliberately a chance to go back in time and maybe say like, "Hey, what is the value you're going to get from going back and continuing to try and peddle the same things and just go back and relive it and think you're going to make the same successes, when what you really need to do is take the best from that past and sort of move on?" That we sort of need to like grow up and move on. And that's, I sort of absolutely love, but not because of the movie's intention, for my own personal reasons, the ending, which I am going to put a spoiler in. So skip ahead if you can. It's going to be very brief description. Is just Indiana Jones thrust and looking around a romantic history that he just wants to go be at peace in, for whatever that means. And then it is knocked away from him and he is ripped back into his present life. And then he's like, "Appreciate the things you have now, Sala, your wife, and keep your hat and move on." And this started occurring to me while the movie was going. So when we got into the practical sets of the tomb he was going into, and we started picking up the signs that he was going back, and Indiana Jones started talking about like his investment in like wanting to go back, and then he is calling out to the villain, and the villains who also think they are the storybook villains who are going to win. You know, there's this perfect idea in taking the character, Indiana Jones, and using him for this, because he's one of the last characters we have that goes back to a period of history that we romanticize where there was a clear villain in the world. And we were able to draw a hard line between good and bad and root for the good guys. And that's sort of the same thing with Winter Soldier, Captain America. And I think the reason why that movie stands a cut above most of the MCU is you have that same sort of break of this fantasy of what if the bad guys revealed themselves to be around and everything was black and white again. And like, it just, there's that moment in the plane where Indiana Jones outthinks them and is like, you're going to the wrong year. And he panics and tries to get them to turn the plane around and then commits. And it's just watching the villain fall apart under his own hubris. I thought was genius. I thought it was amazing. And all they're trying to do, all the heroes are trying to do is just survive. And then Indiana Jones has like just this moment of just like, I'm here in one of those impossible moments that have only happened 3 or 4 times in my life, where I have a chance to grasp onto something magical and historical. And I want to cling to it because I don't want to lose it. And it's just this huge movie length, 2.5 hour punch in the face reminder. You can't. You have to move on. Like, the more I think about it, the more engrossed I get in this sort of fantasy of what the movie is to me, when in reality, we know what it is. We know that it's a studio who pushed to do this, and they got a young guy to wear a fake Harrison Ford face, and they animate it with CGI. And it kind of reminded me of this episode of Futurama, which I've been rewatching, where the professor puts a bunch of stem cell goop on his face to make himself young, and then it like jumps off and crawls away. You know, it just, all of a sudden, this idea of like destiny and wanting to turn back time and this thing, it became like this icon where Indiana Jones was the perfect action character with this romanticized past where he's like, I'm going to talk quips about the Fuhrer and I'm going to punch Nazis and I'm going to do everything. And we got this great reminder that we totally could do that. But then the rest of the movie asks you, why would we? And I think it does a much stronger job, even if it's accidentally, of doing that than something like Matrix Revolutions did. And this is like living in my gut and in my brain. And I keep going over it in my head and I can't let it go.
Except for that's not what Disney is doing with Lucasfilm. So, you know what your whole thing reminded me of? I just watched the last season of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which was a show I really like on Prime Video. And in it, Tony Shalhoub is a theater critic, and they go see this show, and afterward he's talking to his wife and a group of people, and he's talking about the play had all this, you know, hidden depths and meanings about the meaning of life and the nature of God. And his wife's like, it was about a boy and a dog. And she's like, yes, but you missed the point. So she gets up and goes to the guy who made the play and, you know, what were you trying to convey? He's like, oh, I just had a dog when I was a kid that I really loved. And that's, you know, and then Tony Shalhoub looks like he wants to die.
Yeah.
I feel that.
I know that would be it.
Because if Disney had any intention of doing that, they wouldn't have dumped Rian Johnson from Star Wars, because that is 150% what Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi, which is unquestionably, to me, the greatest Star Wars film in history. And they patently rejected that and went back to effing Emperor Palpatine resurrected from the dead in the last movie stronger, so that you can just be like, oh and my God, why did this happen to me?
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I'm starting to get this feeling that we're in this finale fireworks display, and I can even mark it with the rise of horror commercially and the James Cameron's Avatar series, which is like the last standing mega blockbuster tentpole that people are hanging their dreams on, but it only has 3 installments to win the world into making blockbusters continue. And franchise after franchise, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, The Matrix, are just coming back with installments, sitting here proving they've got nothing left new to offer.
Which, I mean,
Even the
speaking of which, they've greenlit another Star Wars that puts Rey right back into.
but it's gonna have to twist into something. And I think what's going to happen, I think over the next,
You know what? I don't think. I honestly don't know if they are going to feel that need because they're still making money. I mean, Indiana Jones is tracking to make between 60 and 75 million, which doesn't sound incredible, but
I don't think it's going to be immediate at all. No, I don't. I think this is the beginning of a fireworks display that's been running for 50 years.
This summer has been a lot. We have had a seemingly endless return to every franchise, and I will say I'm excited for Mission Impossible.
I am
In a
too.
week or two, but that's the rare franchise that has been going for more than 20 years, where the last installment was the best one they've had.
But like even
And
that
it
one
keeps
has
getting
this.
better. I love Christopher McQuarrie, but when they announced they were making another Indiana Jones, I was like, no. When they
Really?
said
Yeah.
they were making another Transformers, I was like,
Really?
no.
Yeah.
You know, the Flash movie, I liked the Flash movie a lot more than I expected, but when they first announced that way back now, it was either like 16 or 17, so they were making it, I was like, no. No. So I mean, all these things we've had to wait eons for. We've had a lot of franchise movies. I would be happy if I never had to watch another John Wick movie again.
See,
And this
me
last
too.
one was
But
three
like
freaking
John
hours.
Wick was that rare thing that just about 10 years ago they showed you there's something special that's been missing from action movies for a while. And even it has run itself into the ground and is just now spinning off into Ballerina and possibly John Wick 5 and like promising more and more.
We're getting that with all the horror franchises too. I mean, Scream.
We are.
I don't need another one, but they're apparently working on like 2 or 3 more. I
Yeah.
have given up hope that Halloween's ended.
Yeah. Well, we know. I don't know how they're gonna to reincarnate that series because you can't do it with Michael and Laurie Strode. You have to find a whole new
Challenge
way to
accepted.
bring Michael Myers in.
They'll find a way if they think they can wring even another dollar out of it. We still just have.
Yeah.
And that's why, as much as I'm curious, like what Andy Muschietti can do with Batman the Brave and the Bold, I was literally thinking since 2005, we've had like 8 Batman movies.
Yeah.
Spider-Man, we are on our 4th different Spider-Man, if you count Spider-Verse, which I do, since 2002.
Which I do.
I mean, it's 20 years and you've had 4 different iterations of the character in franchise films.
But see, that's the sign. It's because they keep trying a new one and it fizzles out, and a new one and it fizzles out, and they're starting to fizzle out faster and faster.
Warner Brothers wants to make it Harry Potter as a TV show. I'm like,
yeah,
kill me.
Like, how far are they going to get? I'll tell you, they will finish Chamber of Secrets and they will cancel the show. I'm predicting that now.
That's all right. As I was sitting there watching the first 2 episodes of the final season of Jack Ryan, it finally dawned on me. I'm like, this feels really oh my God, they're doing Clear and Present Danger. Okay. I was like, wait, is that guy going to end up being Chavez? And he's like, my name's Chavez. And I'm like, oh, dang. I was like, well, I feel like I've seen yes.
Okay, cool.
Well, before we get out of here, this man for 42 years has embodied this character over 5 films.
So
Eric, what is your ranking for the franchise?
3, 1, 2, 5, 4.
Yeah, 4 being the last, it's Crystal Skull. So your favorite one is The Last Crusade.
And I saw this really thoughtful video from Red Letter Media talking about how The Last Crusade gives so much characterization to Indiana Jones that it's not the same. It sort of limits him from being the free action figure he is in the first two. And I actually kind of liked their criticism of it, but I don't care. That movie has absolutely flawless internal reasoning for the motivations and the plot, beautiful characterizations of characters, absolutely wild spectacle and adventure, and like thoughtful like subversions of character tropes and like who they would normally be to one another. It has everything. I absolutely love
Plus
Last
Sean
Crusade.
Connery.
Yeah, like absolutely, and they absolutely know he's Indiana Jones, and that's absolutely, or he's James Bond, and that's absolutely why he's Indiana Jones' father, and it's amazing.
Did you ever watch The Big Bang Theory when I was on?
Yeah. And are you talking about the episode with the?
Yes, I still can't get over the episode where they basically
just like break off the first movie.
kind of, even though I can tell they
doesn't
love
bother me.
Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Right.
I can't help
that
but
doesn't
think
bother me.
about it now that Indiana Jones has literally no impact on the.
Yeah.
Every time when we're on Free Watch and that comes up, I'm like, this gets me. But you know what? Like you, I don't care.
Right.
Raiders of the Lost Ark came out the same year I was born.
Oh, wow.
So it came out almost, I think it was like a month after I was born. But that's my favorite of Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Not too far behind though is Last Crusade. I think most people have those two in some order. There's kind of a bigger gap for me between those two and Temple of Doom, but I still have that one number 3. Then I would slot Dial of Destiny in as 4, and then Crystal Skull. You know, I just not all the plot worked, and then the ending. It's like, I don't know if Steven Spielberg finished the X-Files marathon. It was like, challenge accepted.
George Lucas was like, aliens, and he was like, no, man, I've done Close Encounters, I've done E.T., I've done every. No, stop it. And he's like, what if they're interdimensional beings? And he's like,
what if
fine,
Indian
George
Marion,
Lucas.
what if Indian Marion get married? All right, I'll do it.
There you go. There's an ending.
What if I give you Shia LaBeouf?
Oh, he could be the next Indiana Jones.
He just died in pictures.
Yeah, and again, it's an easy way to just like write off a character who wasn't popular for Disney marketing wise.
Incredibly emotional though,
but that scene on the
boat. I still think that was the best scene in Dial of Destiny, because Harrison Ford was kind of like at his most, even other times, like tonally, like you mentioned, when they're on the boat in Dial of Destiny, you know, and forgetting that creepy Mads Mikkelsen's just staring him down for 3 minutes, but she's like all happy they escaped, and he's like, my best friend, one of my good friend just died, and and you think, oh yeah, that should be sad, and then 10 seconds later it's still another quippy joke, and where should we go next? And I'm like, okay, that didn't that's not how humans work.
You go from Raiders of the Lost Ark with Alfred Molina's death, and he just says adios, Sapito, you know, and he runs off. You know, and they had a mixed relationship for sure, but you know, it's such a striking contrast in the beginning of this movie, punching Nazis off a train to their death left and right, to when just people in an office are shot, and Indiana Jones measures their pulse and there's blood on his hands, and he's grieving for the death of Antonio Banderas, and he's heartbroken over the loss of his son. Death has like real consequence in this movie. And it's so different from what everything else has been. Like, the villains are sort of acting like they're movie villains, but it feels like they're accidentally doing that in the real world, and everyone else is just like, whoa, like it's a very interesting movie. I can't get over your description of that. It's like, I never want to interview James Mangold about this movie, because I feel like there's this sort of thing living in my chest that would be killed when I like inevitably hear the reality of.
Better yet, we'll set you up to interview Kathleen Kennedy.
Oh, please.
future of
Any day of the
Lucasfilm.
week.
Future.
Yeah. I'll get a haircut for that interview. I don't. Ooh.
Well, that'll wrap it up for Indiana Jones time. But next week, Eric and I will be back. You may have noticed the calendar has flipped from June to July, which means half the year is gone. Where has that half gone? But we will look at 5 movies we really liked from the first half of the year. And I like to remind people by this time last year, we had already seen the eventual Best Picture winner released. We had seen Top Gun Maverick released, a couple movies that were with people's top 10 lists throughout the year. So don't sleep on the first half of the year. We'll roll out some of our favorites. Looking forward to seeing what sticks out to you.
Yeah.
Will it be?
And shout out
It's
to
going to be
whoever
the Indiana Jones that you thought you saw.
Yeah, right. Shout out to whoever that one person is we can see who's watching us live. We love you. Anyways.
Have a great week, and can't wait to share our top 5 list with you next week. Until then, we'll see you at the movies.